Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, again. Thank you so much for coming along on tonight's call. Hey, listen, we've got a great call lined up for you, but I need to do a quick infomercial. Brisbane, Australia, tomorrow night, Wednesday night, 6 p.m., we have an incredible event on with a group of wellness professionals. So we're hosting an event in Brisbane, Australia. You need to go up to ordertickethere.com. Ordertickethere.com. Order your tickets. This is going to be a great. If you've got anybody in the Brisbane area or region, you need to get up to the site. Have a look at that .com site, ordertickethere.com. It's a wellness professional event tomorrow night in Brisbane, Australia, the 23rd of February, Wednesday night. Mr. Lamb, I would like you to become the host for me and take over tonight's call with Master Shane.
Thank you, Rob. I think that's going to be an incredible event. So make sure you order the ticket. So again, welcome everyone. My name is Peter Lam, the CS of Cincino Hong Kong. You are watching the Cincino APAC Wellness Professional Presentation. I invite you to join our presentation every Tuesday in February, March, and April. Today is the 4th presentation in February. The topic is strengthening your natural immunity shield. So you are going to learn a lot of actionable tips on how to protect yourself. Okay, Shane will be the speaker for tonight, and here is Shane's background. He has a master's degree of science in nutrition from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He is also a certified medical interpreter from Guangdong University of Foreign Studies, a certified HeartMed clinical intervention practitioner, a certified brain health coach, and also a qualified yoga and meditation teacher. So without further ado, let's welcome Shane to come on stage. Thank you, Shane, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, Rob. So before we start, could you please spend some time reading the disclaimer, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. How's the volume of my voice? Is it okay? Okay, cool, thank you. Let me... Okay, so welcome everyone. Today or tonight, depending on where you are, we're going to talk about how to strengthen your natural immunity shield. And I'm Shane, and if this is the first time you've come to my webinar, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome back. So here's a rundown of what we're going to talk about today. So I will talk about the connection between vitamin D levels and infection rate, and then I'll talk about the role that vitamin D plays in our immune system and in our immunity. And then I'll talk about what you can do to learn about your vitamin D levels, the vitamin D test, and then I'll give you some strategies on how to restore your vitamin D level to an optimum level. And then I'll share with you some evidence, and then another immunity star compound product is 1316 Beta-Glucan. So today I'll be talking about these two compounds, and then at the end I'll be sharing some evidence as well. So let's get started. So before we talk about vitamin D and infection rate, let's understand the different levels. Actually, there is no consensus as to what constitutes an optimum level of vitamin D, but then there is certain, well, a level of agreement in terms of what constitutes deficiency in of vitamin D. So if your blood level of vitamin D, we usually use your serum 25 hydroxy D3 level as a marker. If you have it lower than 20 ng per milliliter, then you're considered deficient in vitamin D. And even if you're over 20, if your blood level falls within the range of 20 to 29.9, it's still considered insufficient. And if you've got it, if you've got over 30, then it's considered sufficient. But sufficient doesn't mean optimum, because what it means is if you have this level in your blood, you will not show any symptoms of deficiency. But then it doesn't mean that your body is functioning at its optimum level if you only have 30 ng. So we'll be talking more about the optimum level later. And I think one of the reasons why there is this widespread prevalence, this widespread insufficiency or deficiency across the world is that many people are afraid of getting vitamin D toxicity, because in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of toxic, a lot of cases of vitamin D toxicity. But then over the past few decades, we have learned a lot more about vitamin D and its functions. So it's quite safe to say that we now understand it a lot more, and we know how to monitor our own levels to not get toxic. So for example, according to the European Food Safety Authority, a tolerable upper daily limit is set at 4,000 IU, which is actually quite high. It's very difficult to get up to that level if you are taking supplements, unless you're taking a lot, but we'll be talking more later. So let's learn about the connection between a low vitamin D level and your infection rate. So in this study, scientists look at 922 newborn babies, and they took a sample of their cord blood and tested their vitamin D levels. And they found that the higher the vitamin D level, the lower the risk of respiratory infection. And what is interesting is that this correlation is was reflected when they were 3 months old, when they were 15 months old, when they were 3 years old, and even when they were 5 years old. So the significance of this is if you have friends who are pregnant, or if you've got children at home, well, make sure that they get enough or optimal levels of vitamin D, because as you can see, it will affect them for a very long time. And you might be thinking, well, they were babies then and if these are children, we can't do anything. That's not true, because vitamin D insufficiency or deficiency can actually be corrected, and I'll be talking more about that later. So let's look at another study. So this study looked at 326 children in ICUs, so intensive care unit, and they found that almost 70% of them had a deficiency level in vitamin D. And they found that if their level of vitamin D is insufficient or even deficient, they had more severe conditions, and they also spend a longer period of time in hospitals. What about adults? So we've talked about infants and children. So according to this meta-analysis, the authors found that there were actually conflicting results among different clinical trials. But after running a statistical analysis, they concluded that vitamin D actually has preventive effects on influenza. And this is important for us, because I think it's one of the most common infection that adults or even children get. So this really tells us a lot about the potential of vitamin D and maintaining a good vitamin D level. And then the next infection that I want to talk about is the virus that everybody is talking about now. There's a lot of censorship on the internet these days, so I won't be saying the name of that virus. I'll just be calling it the virus that everybody is talking about. So according to this meta-analysis, the authors found that among those who were infected, 41% of them were deficient in vitamin D, and 42% of them were insufficient, meaning that together they made up 83% of the whole cohort of people who were infected. And if their level of vitamin D was deficient or insufficient, they actually had a 3.3 times higher risk of infection with the virus that we're talking about now. And not only that, they looked at the symptoms of these people. They found that actually 81% of these people only had mild symptoms, but 14% of them had severe symptoms, and 5% of them were in a critical condition, meaning that they had organ failure. And what they found was, in these severe and critical cases, their vitamin D level was very, very low, actually as low as 16. If you remember from our first slide, 20 is what, if your level is 20, it's already considered deficient. And when they averaged it out among all these people who were infected, they found that the average was 20.3, which means all these people who got infected were deficient in vitamin D. And in fact, after the statistical analysis, they found that people whose level was low had a 5.1 times higher risk of developing severe conditions of the virus. So now that we know that if we have a low vitamin D level, we have a higher risk of infection of various diseases or viruses, then, well, now let's understand what role that vitamin D actually plays in our immunity. So in the past, we knew that vitamin D was important for bone health, but over the past few decades, scientists have made a lot more discoveries about vitamin D, and we now understand that vitamin D is needed and it can be activated by many cell types in our body, including our intestine, our pancreas, our fat cells, our brain cells, and very importantly, our immune cells. So vitamin D really has more health functions than we used to think. So what exactly does it do? First of all, it can improve the physical barrier of our body. It can also strengthen the tight junction between cells, meaning that foreign objects or pathogens cannot pass through the cells. And vitamin D also enhances the killing capacity of our immune cells, such as the macrophages or the neutrophils. And so basically, vitamin D helps us build an immunity shield wall. Yes, okay, so let's look at some studies here. Here is a review of the different functions that vitamin D play in our immune system. And the author summarized all the different functions. And we now know that vitamin D actually increases the production of antimicrobials in our body, especially beta-defensin and cathelicidin, which are actually very, very important for our innate immunity. So in certain cells, especially our skin cells, our bronchial cells, and our urogenital cells. And the implication for this is very important, because think about it, our skin cells and our bronchial cells and the urogenital cells, they are our first line of defense, because they are in direct contact with the outside world, whether it's the air or the food that we eat. So if these cells are strong, if they are able to produce more antimicrobials, then we're better protected. So yeah, now we know that vitamin D can protect us against pathogens and various infections. Then what about vitamin deficiency? Okay, now we know vitamin D is very important. And you might be thinking, well, I exercise a lot outdoors, or I eat a very balanced diet, so I probably don't have vitamin D deficiency. Well, this is where you might be wrong, because according to the WHO, in 2016, there were 1 billion people worldwide who were deficient in vitamin D, and we're only talking about 2016. That was 6 years ago. Think about it now. So in the past 2 to 3 years, we have been in, well, so there have been a lot of lockdowns all over the world. And what does that mean? That means we were trapped indoors. We were not able to go outside. We were not getting as much sun exposure as we would have needed, that means our vitamin D level must have suffered. So I am thinking that this number might be even higher now. Well, it definitely will be higher. And back in 2016, 95% of the US population were deficient in vitamin D. In fact, if you look at this graph here, comparing the different vitamins, vitamin D is actually the most common deficiency. You see, the black bar refers to people who rely only on food, and the gray bar refers to people who rely both on food and supplements. And you see that if they rely only on food, almost 90% or maybe more than 90% of them are deficient in vitamin D. And even if they take a supplement, they might not be taking an optimal level, or maybe there's something wrong with their gut system, their digestive system, so they're not absorbing the right levels, which we'll be talking more about later. And okay, for people who live close to in a tropical area, well, even in India, we see that in studies, they found that even in sunny places like India, 30 to 50% children studied there were deficient in vitamin D. And what about pregnant ladies who actively take a supplement? Well, we know that if they take a prenatal multivitamin supplement, they get 400 IU, but that is still not enough because 73% of pregnant ladies are deficient in vitamin D, and 80% of babies at birth are deficient as well. So why is it so hard to get vitamin D, and why is it so easy to be deficient? Let's look at the sources from which we can get vitamin D. The primary source is, of course, from sunlight, because when we are exposed to UVB, our skin will produce vitamin D3. So that should be our main source of getting sunlight, getting vitamin D. But of course, not many people get enough sunlight because we're wearing a lot, or maybe it's winter, or maybe it's lockdown, or maybe we're putting on sunscreen. Well, then what about food? Food is not a very good source because there aren't a lot of food items that give you good amounts of vitamin D. Well, maybe some oily fish or cod liver oil, but then they still don't give you enough if you don't take enough. Well, then the last, another strategy is to supplement yourself. Okay, what about fortified milk? A lot of people say, oh, well, I drink a lot of milk, so I should be getting enough vitamin D. Well, it does give you some amount, but insufficient. Let's look at some data here. So if you drink a glass of milk, a glass of fortified milk, you only get 100 IU per day, and we'll be talking about that number soon. So just now we saw a graph showing that people who rely only on food, well, 90% of them were deficient in vitamin D. According to this study, actually adults who rely only on food sources are only getting half of what they need. And what does that mean? And why is it so hard to get enough just from food? If you compare this from sun exposure, if you spend 30 minutes under the sun during midday, you get up to 20,000 IU. But if you want to get it from food, for example, you need to eat 7 servings of salmon a day to get the same amount, or 20 glasses of fortified milk. How many people can say that they can drink 20 glasses of fortified milk a day? Not many, right? So, well, now that we know it's very common to be deficient, but if you're still not convinced, then I suggest that you do a vitamin D test. Well, then there will be no argument. You will know for sure that whether you are deficient or not. So there is a very easy test that you can do, the vitamin D test. It's a finger prick test. It takes maybe 2 minutes, so you only need 2 drops of your blood. Yeah, it takes maybe 2-3 minutes to do it, and then you send it to Norway to a lab associated with the University of Oslo, and in 2 weeks' time you will get your result. And this test tests your the circulating blood level of 25 hydroxy D3, and it does not test your 125 dihydroxy because that one is not accurate because it only reflects your kidney function instead of your vitamin D stores in the body. And this test is actually considered by academics as the most accurate vitamin D test. Okay, so how often should I do this test? If you are doing it for the first time, I highly recommend that you retest yourself after 8 weeks, after you have started a regimen of supplementation, because, well, we all have unique biologies. Some people are predisposed to poorer absorption of certain vitamins. So it's important that you understand or you have an idea of how well you're improving your vitamin D levels. So if you're doing it for the first time, I recommend that you retest yourself after 8 weeks. And if you've already been taking it for a while and you regularly test yourself, then I recommend that you set up a seasonal schedule. You can do it twice a year. The first time in late autumn, late fall, just to check your vitamin D stores in your body around October or November time in the North Hemisphere. And another time after winter months, maybe in March, just to track your progress. Then you will know how well you have been doing in terms of your supplementation and your absorption as well. So after you've done the test, you will get a report. And how do we interpret the report? Let's have a look. I am highlighting 2 aspects of the report. It's actually quite easy to understand because it is color-coded. If it's red, that means you're deficient. If it's yellow, it means you're borderline. If it's green, then you're in a safe zone. So what you want to do is you want to get your level to the green zone. So you see there are actually 2 units here. You can use NM, so nanomole per liter, or NG per milliliter. I prefer NG per milliliter because it's actually easier for you to work out how much vitamin D you should be taking in order to get to the optimum level. So I'll be talking about that on the next slide. And like I said before, if you set up a seasonal schedule of doing it twice a year, then you will be able to track your progress with this test. You will be able to see right away whether you're maintaining an optimum level or not by seeing the color. So it's actually a very convenient test, and it's very economical and convenient. So, okay, now let's look at interpreting your test results. So the reason why I recommend looking at NG per ml is that it's easier for those of us who use metrics, because if you want to increase 1 NG, you need to take 100 IU for 3 to 4 months every day. So it's actually very easy to work it out. It's 100 to 1. So many integrative medical practitioners agree that you need at least 40 mg per milliliter to have for it to be considered an optimal level. So let's say if your test result is 10 mg, that if you want to get it up to 40, you will have to take 3,000 IU per day for 3 to 4 months in order to get to that level. Or if you're happy with just 30 mg, then you will need to take 2,000. It's that easy actually. Just if you want, let's say if your current level is 20 and you want to get to 30, that means you need 10 more, and 10 more, that is, you need to take 1,000 every day. So just times 100. So if you need 20 more, then you need to take 2,000 every day. And what does that mean? We'll be talking about that on the next slide. So there are a few special groups of people who need to take special attention. For example, infants or young children because they might be spending a lot of time indoors. They might not have enough exposure to the sun, and also elderly people, they have poorer metabolism, so their skin doesn't make as much vitamin D as younger people. And also for obese people or people who have chronic conditions like diabetes, I recommend that they work with a licensed medical professional to closely monitor the level and to give them a tailor-made routine to restore their vitamin D level. And also people who have digestive problems. Maybe they have dysbiosis in the microbiome, so they might not be digesting food or nutrients properly. So these people need special attention from licensed medical professionals. So where can you get vitamin D? In the Zenzino product range, there are actually quite a few products that you can take to increase your vitamin D. The easiest way is it's a new product. It's called XenoShine. It's vitamin D and magnesium supplement. We'll be talking more in depth about this, but you can also get it from Protect, from Extend, which is a multivitamin, multimineral supplement, and of course, your balance oil. So I will be focusing more on the XenoShine because this is a very convenient tool for you to correct your vitamin D level. So each tablet in the XenoShine product contains 500 IU. So we were just saying, okay, if you need to raise your blood vitamin D level by 10, you need to take 1,000 every day. So 1,000 is equal to 2 tablets here, and each box contains 60 tablets, which means it will last you a whole month if you need to raise your blood vitamin D level by 10. And so XenoShine, this is 500 IU per tablet. But if you're already taking other Zenzino products, for example, the balance oil, Extend, and Protect, well, you should know that these products all contain 800 IU per serving. So if you want to raise your vitamin D level, you need to take these into account. So yeah, so I recommend that you talk with your healthcare provider to understand more and to have a tailor-made solution for you. Okay, if you're still not convinced, well, let me give you some numbers. In the US in 2004, the economic costs of vitamin D deficiency due to inadequate access to sunlight, diet, fortified food, or supplementation was actually 40 to 56 billion annually. And what does that mean? Okay, the US population is 330 million. So the economic cost per head is 145 US dollars, which is around 128 euros or 200 Australian dollars. And if we want to correct our vitamin D level with just XenoShine, well, US dollars, it's 13 US dollars per box, or 11 euros per box, and it works out to be 78 per year, or 66 euros per year, or 103 Australian dollars a year. And that is a lot cheaper than the 145 US dollars that we see here. And what's more, you spend 145 in illness care because you are ill, because you are not feeling well. But if you spend 66 euros, you're not feeling ill, you're feeling great, you're enjoying radiant health, and you don't have the suffering associated with vitamin D deficiency, and it's even cheaper. So so it's very important to be to take a preventive approach rather than a treatment approach. Okay, now let's look at some scientific evidence of the efficacy of vitamin D supplementation. So earlier on, we looked at data regarding well, the connection between low vitamin D level and infection rate. Okay, so this study looked at over 11,000 participants. It's a meta-analysis, and they found that the strongest protection from vitamin D actually comes from daily or weekly doses instead of what they call bolus dose. So you take a large amount of vitamin D in one go, and then you don't take it for a very long time. That is not recommended. So daily or weekly is recommended. Okay, and in this study, the researchers looked at Black and Asian people, and they tested their vitamin D level after supplementation, and they found that, first of all, they had a few findings. They found that oral supplementation is better than eating fortified food like cereals or maybe fortified milk. And they also found that D3, vitamin D3, is a better form than D2, which we already know. Okay, what about taking supplement, or vitamin D in this case, to help us fight an infection? Okay, so if, let's say, someone is already down with flu, and is it still useful to take it? Well, definitely. Let's look at this study here that they did on infants. So on the left is a graph of number of patients with fever, and on the right is viral load. So we can see that red is a high dose vitamin D group. So they took 1,200 IU per day, and the low dose was just 400 IU. And we could see that the number of infants who had fever were about half of the low dose group, and they also recovered much faster because they took about half the amount of time to recover. And also by so there were 3 timings here: day 1, day 4, and day 7. By day 4, we could see that the viral load of these infants were very, very low compared with the low dose group. And by the end of the first week, they were pretty much the level was pretty much undetected, which means they have pretty much recovered from influenza. But then in the low dose group, they were recovering, but then they still had some viral load, which means they could still be infecting other people. If you have quite a few children at home, or if if these sick children go to school, then they could be affecting other people as well, other children as well. So it's very, very important. It's a very important finding for us to know that vitamin D actually works in fighting influenza. Okay, and here is something that everybody is talking about. Again, well, it's the virus everybody is talking about. So is it useful to take supplement D, to supplement with vitamin D after you are infected? The answer is yes, because let's look at this study from Spain. So they found that they divided these infected people, these patients, into 2 groups. One did not take any vitamin D, the other one took vitamin D, and they found that the severity of these people was very different, because if they did not take vitamin D, half of them went into ICU, but if they took vitamin D, only 2% of them needed ICU. So what's the best way of taking vitamin D? Well, we know that if you take it with fat, because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, it's much better absorbed. So in fact, it's up to 32% better absorbed, which is why I highly recommend that you start with balanced oil, because it has very good very good quality fish oil or algal oil together with vitamin D. So it's much better absorbed. And if you also need to take Xenoshine to correct your blood level, then I recommend that you take that with your balance oil. So it's easier for your stomach to digest that and absorb it. Okay, now let's talk about the second star compound, which is 1316 beta-glucan. It's actually a compound found in the cell walls of yeasts and fungi. And where can you find that? In the Zinzino product range. You can find it in Protect and also Extend. So what does it do? It can prepare our innate immune system to get them ready. For example, it can increase the capacity of macrophages and neutrophils, and make sure that they're always ready to fight in case there is an invasion from pathogens. So, and it also helps the adaptive immune system. And so studies found that 1316 beta-glucan can actually help mammals help mammals fight infections. So according to this study by the Canadian Department of Defense, mice which were supplemented with beta-glucan for 7 days, even if they were given a lethal dose of anthrax, they all survived. On the contrary, half of the control group actually died. And let's look at more evidence of 1316 supplementation. So here, in this study, there were actually 2 experiments. The first experiment was athletes were given 1316 for 28 days after the marathon, and then they found that they had a 37% reduction in symptoms regarding their upper tract respiratory infections, such as common cold or flu. And the second experiment was on their salivary immunoglobulin A, which is a biomarker of your immune function. So these subjects took 1316 for 10 days before they did a very strenuous cycling test, and then they tested their saliva 2 hours after the test, and they found that there was a 32% increase in their IgA, which means that their immunity actually increased in response to a stressor, the cycling test. And what about this study here? The researchers looked at patients who were undergoing a high-risk operation, and they gave them beta-glucan 1316 intravenously. So it was injected directly into their veins before the surgery. And they found that they had a 39% reduced infection rate, and they also needed less antibiotics, and they stayed for a shorter period of time in ICU, and also the survival rate increased. Okay, then what about the virus that everybody is talking about? Before we look at that, let's look at this thing called D-dimer, which is a biomarker. You can understand it as a marker of inflammation in your body. So in this study, they found that in these patients, patients of the virus that everybody is talking about, they found that they tested the D-dimer level, and they found a threshold, which is 1.5 microgram. So the lower it is, the less inflamed their body is. The higher it is, the more inflamed. And they found that if their level is lower than 1.5, the death rate is relatively low, 7.9%. But if their inflammation is high, the death rate was 42.9%. And also, people who had lower inflammation spent a shorter period of time in hospital as well. So why is this important? What's the implication of this D-dimer thing? So let's look at this study that looked at supplementing with beta-glucan and measuring D-dimer, which we just talked about. Remember, the threshold is 1.5. So there were 3 groups: a control group, one beta-glucan group, and 2 beta-glucans group, which means in this group, they took only 1 type of beta-glucan. In this group, they took 2 types. And the second group, so this one B-glucan group took 120 mg per day, and the 2 beta-glucan group took 360 mg per day. So let's look at the graphs here. This is a control group, which was okay. There wasn't much to see, but look at these two here, especially the third group. If you look at the number here on day 0, the level was over 1.5, which means, if the statistics from the last study was correct, 43% of these people could have died. But in the end, fortunately, nobody from these 3 groups died, because these 2 groups were taking beta-glucan. And if you can see from the graph here, their inflammation actually went down even by day 15. It was already very low in both cases. So by day 30, you see it went down from 1.6 to 0.16 micrograms. So it shows that if you take 2 types of beta-glucan, it's actually more powerful than taking just one type of beta-glucan. Well, then the question is, what about taking 3 types of beta-glucan? Because in extend and protect, the beta-glucan you get is actually from 3 different types of beta-glucan. And if you take protect, 1 capsule gives you 200 mg, which is more than the first group. And if, well, in an emergency situation, you can take 2 capsules, which will give you 400 mg of 3 different types of beta-glucan, which will be more potent than the second group. So these days, I recommend everybody stock up on protect. Keep some at home and carry some with you wherever you go, especially if you go somewhere where there are a lot of people, or if you have been in contact with someone who you suspect might have got the virus. Then just take 2. Just for safety measures. But if you're already taking extend 4 capsules a day, then you only need to take 1. In that case, yeah. And what about this? So now we know the virus, and then, well, there's also, the jab that everybody is talking about, and some people are worried about it, worried about what it can do to your body. So in this study, they found that beta-glucan can actually protect you against environmental toxin. In this case, it's thimerosal, which is actually a preservative found very commonly in many jabs, for diseases. And let's look at 2 charts here. They looked at the immune function. So this one is phagocytosis of your macrophages. So the white bar refers to just beta-glucan, so that is a reference. And this one here, the third one, refers to thimerosal, which means after taking thimerosal, your immune function actually goes down a lot. But if you take it with beta-glucan, it's largely preserved. And on this side, it's your T cells, which is also an immune cell. If you take thimerosal with beta-glucan, then the effect is very minimal. That means if you're worried that the heavy metals or whatever toxins that might be in the jab, then I highly recommend that you take beta-glucan, for safety measures. So these are my sharings for today. And but if you are serious about strengthening your immune system, I highly recommend that you read Dr. Paul Clayton's book, Strengthening Your Immune System. It's a wonderful book, and it gives you very practical strategies to improve your immunity. So I highly recommend that you read it. It's available on Amazon, so you can order a hard copy, or you can also get a digital copy. So next month, on the 22nd, I'll be coming back and I'll be sharing with you how you can enjoy optimal quality of life using nutritional strategies. So thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Yeah, over to you, Rob and Peter. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shane, for the amazing presentation. I believe we all learned a lot tonight. Vitamin D is important for you. So how to monitor your vitamin D level? I recommend you to use the Cincino vitamin D test. And how can you correct your vitamin D level? Here is the recommendation, the Cincino Shine, okay? And if you purchase a premier kit tonight or before the end of February, you will have a special gift, the Cincino Skin Serum. What a great presentation. But if the Cincino Shine is not available in your market or in your country yet, make sure you have a subscription, premier subscription on the premium balanced oil or any version of the balanced oil. So that's all for tonight. Thank you, everyone, especially Shane. What an incredible presentation. Remember to come back same time next Tuesday, 1st of March. We have Dr. Jeanette to present a topic of understanding cellular nutrition. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again. So until next time, thank you all and bye-bye.